Howdy. All right, so this is actually my last video before heading off to Hanover Messe, and what I wanted to do was talk about the Hanover Messe plan. I want to go over a MQTT, 3 applications of MQTT using A, MQTT5, B, MQTT Sparkplug, and C, MQTT OPC UA Part 14 pub sub using an Arduino C33 edge device. I'm just going to show an application. What does it look like if you use any of those 3 specs to send the exact same data, which would be device data? So IP address, what Wi-Fi it's connected to, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go over that, and then I'm going to go over an OPC conversation at the very end, including a conversation I had with an OEM PLC vendor earlier this week about why it is they're not active with the OPC Foundation and what their experience has been over time. And then during the MQTT application, I'm going to talk about something that just recently came up with a patent. Schneider Electric has patented an application using MQTT and Sparkplug to update their PLCs. So with that, let's get going. All right. So the Hanover Messe plan, I'm actually flying to London. My flight to London is in like 4 hours. So I'm going to shoot this video. We're going to get it uploaded, and I'm going to get the hell out of here. So I'm going to be in Hanover for Hanover Messe over the next, so I'm flying out today. I'm going to get in late Sunday night in Germany, and then I'll be at the show Monday morning. I'm going to go through my schedule. So there was a lot of people who reached out. I'm going to give you my WhatsApp. So if you want to send me a message on WhatsApp, you can do that while I'm in Germany. We're basically nonstop meetings. So I'm going to quickly just go through what the plan is here. So we're going to be in Hanover Messe Monday through Thursday. We're going to fly back on Friday, so we won't be there at the very end. But I'm going to be attending and speaking at 2 community meetup events. One will be at the Litmus Automation booth, and the other one, our big community event, is going to be at the Portainer booth. It's actually a cooperation between Portainer and another group, another company. The 4.0 Solutions LinkedIn has all the information on those meetups. I'll also tweet them out like, hey, we're getting ready to do this community meetup. In both cases, I'm going to be sitting like on a mini panel, doing a conversation. So, and then I also have 2 formal dinners that I'll be doing during the week. I think one is with GIS and the other one's with Portainer, but I'll go through the schedule here. If you are a community member in the EU, our primary goal of going to Hanover Messe, we have primarily 3 primary goals. Number 1, we're going to be taking a look at I know of some announcements that are going to take place. I want to be there for the announcements. I'm skeptical of what the outcomes will be, but I want to be there for the announcements. Number 2, this is a chance for us to meet a bunch of people who are members of the community who are in the UU that we haven't had a chance to meet yet. So we decided, hey, we're going to send a whole contingent. So we actually have myself, one of our media guys will be with us filming. So we're going to be filming content the whole time. We'll have our Intellic Integrations Chief Operating Officer will be there. Our Chief Financial Officer will be there. Our Director of Engineering will be there, as well as our Chief Experience Officer. And then myself and the media guy. So I think that's 6. We'll have 6 people at Hanover Messe. All right, so Monday, we're going to get in kind of early. Actually, we're going to get in there kind of late on Monday. So we have a mid-morning meeting. We're going to meet with HiByte at the AWS booth. There is AWS has a big announcement. We'll be there first thing Tuesday morning. AWS is going to be recording a panel discussion with a customer about their UNS architecture. So Amazon Web Services UNS architecture. It's a pretty big deal to have a hyperscaler's marketing GTM acknowledge the unified namespace. So I'm actually going to be there at that on Tuesday. On Monday, I'm going to meet with John, John Harrington of HighByte at the AWS booth. We're also going, we're going to be meeting with members of AWS on Monday midday. We will also be meeting with someone from AstraZeneca. We're also going to be meeting with somebody from Amorph Systems. And then I'm going to be meeting with Simon Potgieter, who is with InfluxDB. I was in San Francisco earlier this week speaking at Influx's annual event, and I'm actually going to be, I saw Simon there, and I'm going to be seeing him in Germany, and we're going to be introducing InfluxDB to a couple of other vendors. Then we have the GIS dinner. So GIS is one of our strategic partners, integrator partners, Monday night. So John McKeon, all of you should be familiar with. We'll be having a dinner with GIS on Monday night. On Tuesday, I am going to be, we're going to be meeting with Evonik and team. So I think Evonik's a company. I'm going to be meeting with Tomas Vidonia, who's the founder of Digital Flows. He's also a big member of the community. And then we're going to have the Litmus community booth party. There is an event link that is on our LinkedIn. Litmus partners are going to be there. So we're going to have Kyndryl, Dell will be there, WWT, Tavaret. And that's going to be from 4 p.m. 4 to 6 p.m. And we'll be talking about building a scalable digital infrastructure. That's on Tuesday. And then Tuesday night, we're going to travel to the Portainer partner dinner. So that's a private dinner we'll be doing. We're going to be doing a bunch of training on Portainer. We use Portainer internally to manage our container infrastructure. I would say it's probably the most slept on platform in the market right now. And we're doing a lot with Neil Cresswell, who is the founder of the company, to raise the profile of Portainer. We think everybody should be using it. And we're connecting Portainer with other vendors. But part of that meeting Tuesday night will be to just, break bread. Wednesday, we're going to be meeting Frigus Capital. We're going to be meeting Manufacturing Industries, Sam Tiara, Frank Thelen with Freitgeist. Then we're going to be doing the Portainer community meetup, which is looks like it's taking place again from 4 to 6 p.m. So the Portainer community meetup, there's also a LinkedIn event for that. So you're going to have Phil Struss, who's the CEO and co-founder of Sedalo, Neil Cresswell, who's the CEO of Portainer. You'll also have Tobias. I cannot say Tobias's last name, but he is the CTO of Portainer. And then you'll have me. In the first hour, we're going to have a discussion between the four of us in a community meetup. And then the second hour from 5 to 6, we're going to have just fellowship, drinks and snacks at the Portainer meetup. And I'm fairly certain this is taking place at the Sedalo booth. I'm going to include all this stuff in my Twitter. So if you want to follow, if you want to know where we're going to be and when, so we can meet up, at Walker D. Reynolds on Twitter, on X. Oh yeah, it's the Sedalo Mosquito booth. Sedalo makes, I'm pretty sure what Sedalo does is they make a enterprise mosquito implementation, and they're actually a Portainer partner, and they're one of the applications you can download. And our conversation will be open source for Industry 4, IoT protocols, and container management. And then on Thursday, the last day that I will be there, I will be meeting with Dominic Obermeyer, who's the CTO of HiveMQ. I'm going to be meeting with Ravel Nugmanov, who is the founder of One Way Automation, and he's launching a new product called Obox Suite, which I have been testing, and I'm actually going to mention again later in the OPC discussion. Obox is basically, think of it as a counterpart to Kep Server. Okay. And that's the plan. Thursday's supposed to be a light day so we can jam in meetings. So I'm going to share on my WhatsApp, or if you want to get a hold of me, message me on WhatsApp. Actually, DMing me on Twitter is going to be the best way to do it. Let's do it that way. So it's at Walker D. Reynolds on X, and you'll be in, if you follow me there and then DM me, let me know where you're going to be. We can meet up. And then Friday, we're heading out first thing in the morning. So we will not be at the show on Friday. Okay. And with that, let me make sure I covered everything I wanted to cover. All right. And let's get into this MQTT application. So this is where the chapter for the MQTT application should come in. So what I'm going to do is I want to quickly go over 3 different applications using MQTT. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by, I have an Arduino C33 right here. So this is an Arduino Portainer C33. So it's part of the Pro series, okay? And what I'm going to do is we're going to do 3 tests here. What I want to do is we're going to start with our regular old flat MQTT5 project. So what I'm going to do is, let me go ahead and compile this. And our goal here is I want to illustrate how MQTT is being used at the device level. That at the end of the day, that's ultimately the goal. I want to demonstrate how it's being used at the device level. So let me go here and let me go ahead and upload our sketch. There we go. Let me go ahead and delete this. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and just share my. So what we've got here is our Arduino is coming online. So as soon as we see line 3 pop up here, this right here is a unified namespace that we have running in the cloud for the community. Okay, and basically what I have is the phases of digital transformation cycling in order. So if you look here, let me move here. So basically phases 1 through 6. So every 5 seconds, this toggles phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5, phase 6, and depending upon which phase we're in, our namespace updates. So basically what this is showing is what does the genealogy of a namespace look like. So our typical unified namespace is we've built endpoints for ISO 55001 and S88, and there's literally an endpoint with all the data that we need, all the compliance records we need for this production line. We have an edge unified namespace where we have a KEP server instance. We actually have the data coming in 2 different ways. We're using HiByte to build this. So we're building a complete raw endpoint that essentially drops a JSON in, and then there are 2 transitions. There's basically 2 topics being published. One is data type examples and simulation examples. So data type examples gets published in, and then simulation examples gets published in, and all of our records update. The other way that we're doing it is we're parsing data types examples and simulation examples in the namespace. So if I go and look at the absolute raw KEP server 2, simulation examples, functions, ramp1 as tags with the tag type, the current timestamp, the full topic path, and the value. What is contained in this KEP server 2 namespace is the same thing that's contained in the KEP server namespace, but the implementation is different. So what we have is KEP server and all tags, and there is a big, massive JSON in here with all the stuff that you see here, okay? So we use this as our demo to demonstrate all the different options we have when we are building a solution, building a unified namespace. We also are capturing in-feed, out-feed state, and waste for each production line. So line 1, edge, and then we have our 4 inputs that we need to do to basically build an MES system. Then we have our ERP namespace. We're only doing 2 functions, both inventory and production order. So these are functional namespaces. In this functional namespace, we have these topics with these values. Okay. All right. So that's what our unified namespace looks like. The other thing that we did, so what we've done, what I'm testing is, I want to go ahead and I want to take a brand new device, and I just want to publish the information on that device. No tags for many functions. All I'm doing is publishing the descriptive descriptive and informative namespaces from this C33. So the first thing that we're doing is we're doing a raw publish. Let me go back here and check and see why it's not publishing. Yeah, let me check our serial monitor. And it looks like it's still connecting to the Wi-Fi. All right, there it goes. So if I come back here, yeah, there it is. All right, so it's connected to the Wi-Fi, and it is now publishing the C33 endpoint, okay? This is pure MQTT5, okay? So we have the IP address, local IP address inside of the office here. We're publishing the MAC ID, the signal strength of the Wi-Fi connection, the SSID, the total uptime in seconds, and the connection duration in seconds using, this is just native MQTT5. The only thing you're not seeing here is the C33 connection status to the MQTT broker. All right, so that is a purely MQTT5 implementation. All right, that's what it looks like. What we have is all of our values that we care about broken out into individual topics that I could then just, grab a tag and drop it on a screen, whether I'm in Ignition, Factory Studio, whatever. Okay, and as that updates, as it continues, it'll show us its connection up duration time. This is already parsed. Okay, all right. So now what I'm going to do, that's MQTT5, and ultimately at the goal, if we want to do something with this data, primarily informative. If we want to do something with information with this data, then we need all those topic payloads parsed. Okay. All right. So let me go back and let's go ahead and update it now for Sparkplug. So what I have is basically 3 different sketches. One that's MQTT5, natively MQTT5. One that is Sparkplug, and one that is OPC UA Part 14. So we're going to do the Sparkplug next. Important to note here with this example, I am not encoding using Google's protobuf, their binary encoding with Google's protobuf, or when I do Part 14, I'm not using the UA binary encoding. What I've done is I've chosen not to encode, decode. I'm leaving them unencoded but formatted for Sparkplug or Part 14. So we're going to do Sparkplug first. So let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and start updating, compiling our sketch here. All right, there it goes. Let me go ahead and delete our okay. And now it's updating. And we'll go ahead and take a look at this new what the Sparkplug looks like. Okay. So what I've done now is I've taken the exact same data points and I have formatted them into a Sparkplug payload. So if I look, we should have a C33 in here eventually. And then a Sparkplug BV 1.0 inside the C33. Let me make sure it's still pushing. So we'll open up our serial monitor. Still connecting to the Wi-Fi. One thing I will say about the Portenta C33, so this is the little tiny module, I think it's maybe $60 or something, that has Wi-Fi on board. It takes forever for it to connect to the Wi-Fi. Once it's connected, it's golden, but it does take forever for it to connect to the Wi-Fi. All right, let me... All right, it's connected. It should be publishing in. Yeah, let me test. There it goes. All right, so let me go ahead here. We're good. All right, so here in our edge, we should have a C33 here. Let me go ahead and just refresh it. Oop, wrong one. Sorry. Oh, interesting how this is working. Let me do this. Let me show you what it looks like here. Yeah, I'm going to show it to you in a... All right, so if you look here, all right, so down, this is what it actually looks like in the MQTT broker. So what we've done is we've created what I've done in my implementation is rather than using the Sparkplug BV 1.0 as the root node, which is what the Sparkplug spec calls out for, and we actually had a conversation with the user group and with Nolan, or with Arlen Nipper. Hey, Arlen, what we'd really like to do is instead of when we're packaging MQTT and Sparkplug, we don't want to have to publish into Sparkplug BV 1.0 as the root node. We want to be able to put that root node anywhere. So, and this is, if you're Arlen, if you're watching, this is what we're talking about. What we'd like to do is put this anywhere within the namespace. So that right now what we have to do with Sparkplug edge nodes is we publish them into a Sparkplug v 1.0 root node, and then we use an IoT platform to take the data from that device and put it in the rest of the namespace. And when we mentioned Arlen, hey, what we'd really like to do is be able to prepend that if we wanted to, so that we could put the Sparkplug BV 1.0 somewhere else and then have the client look for that query, look for the Sparkplug endpoints, and then parse them in the namespace. He was like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that. Okay. So that's kind of what we're looking at. But this is what it looks like. We have an end data, which is node data. We do not have, you don't see the birth here because I'm not retaining it and I connected to the broker after the birth took place. But we basically have a edge of network node, which is C33 node. And then we have we're only publishing two metrics. One is uptime and one is the signal strength. Okay. But that's what that looks like. That's what Sparkplug looks like. Okay. They're both were very easy to implement. All right. So now with the last one, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at, part 14. So now what I'm going to do is let me go ahead and take the OPC UA part 14. Let me go ahead and upload that. Let me clear this namespace out. And we'll show you that. And I'm just looking to make sure. Let me open the serial monitor. Just make sure we're connected. And what most people don't understand, and this is a common, there's two approaches to using MQTT as an IoT protocol. And for most manufacturers, we're all kind of dealing with the same issues. And the primary issue is that, let me make sure. Yeah, there we go. All right. So I've got my part 14 data in here. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, so this is what part 14 looks like. So what we've done now is we have taken, we still have in the exact same topic payload, or in the exact same topic, we now have a part 14 payload, which the spec doesn't call for. I just called it part 14, and then we've dropped in our data writer, which is we have a network message, publisher ID, and then all of the data. Let's actually drop this on the screen. let's see how much is in there. And basically everything that was in the MQTT 5 is now in this endpoint. Now, what I will say is the question that I've been asking over and over and over again is, why would I use, if Ignition is the most popular IoT platform in the world, and it natively parses Sparkplug payloads, okay? The spec is shorter, it is simpler to implement, and all of the IoT platforms that people are working with can parse Sparkplug. Why would I use Part 14 when Part 14 is considerably longer? Ostensibly, the reason I would want to use OPC UA Port 14 is to get all of the other node attributes that I would get from OPC. Like, what I would want is, the whole reason I would use Part 14 is simply because I wanted to take a legacy OPC device and I would want to include a lot of the node attributes that you get using OPC UA, right? That's why I would use it. But in digital transformation projects, if the goal of digital transformation is to convert data into information, okay, that is, I want to take events and I want to put them together and convert them into information. I don't need most of the node attributes that are in the OPC specification. Like, I'm still struggling as to why I would use Part 14. Like, it makes sense because Part 14 really doesn't have any adoption. And the reason it doesn't have any adoption is because I think most people are asking the question, why should I use it? What would be the reason I would use it? I mean, the truth is that for me, what makes most sense is if I'm publishing a device, if I'm taking a device, putting it together and publishing it, Sparkplug makes the most sense for me. If I want to turn the Portenta into an edge of network device, Sparkplug makes the most sense because it is going to be natively parsed by the IoT platforms. Ignition, Factory Studio, Canary Labs, Historian, like Flow Software, they all support Sparkplug. I don't think any of them support Part 14. And what I mean is that by not supporting Part 14, as a platform, as a client, it doesn't parse this. I have to parse this, right? I will have to parse this. So if I want to get it down to where publisher ID is C33 node, right? And the dataset class ID is sensor data. If I want to view this dataset class ID as sensor data in a visualization, I have to parse this because the platform itself doesn't parse that natively. But it does parse Sparkplug, and it does obviously parse native MQTT 5. And so the question is, why would I use Part 14? And if you look, because in order for Part 14 to be valuable, you need device manufacturers to use Part 14 on their devices, and you need software vendors to be Part 14 compliant so they can parse those payloads in order for it to be valuable. Okay? No one's doing that. Lots and lots of people are doing it with Sparkplug, and no one's doing it with Part 14. Okay? And I know I'm not crazy. I'm going to read a conversation here in a second. I'm going to go through the final part of this OPC conversation. And, I've been asking for weeks now. I did a post on LinkedIn saying, hey, I am looking for the definitive OPC UA product. I've got, Randy Armstrong has been giving me a hard time saying I've got this vendetta against the OPC Foundation, which I do not. I don't have any personal feelings about the OPC Foundation. But he's been saying I have this vendetta. We'll get into this conversation right now. And I don't. I mean, I want the OPC Foundation to be successful. I have decided to publicly fight this battle because the community's asked me to. Okay. And the goals are, we want new leadership at the OPC Foundation. We do not want Stefan Hoppe to be the president of the OPC Foundation any longer. We don't want Eric Barnstedt to be leading half the fucking working groups at the OPC Foundation. We want the OPC Foundation to change its code of conduct and move away, encourage dissent, primarily focus on the best ideas winning. Right now, the ideas that win are the consensus ideas. So, there's a funny video I saw of like the Socialist Party of America, or maybe it was the Communist Party of America. And it was what happens when you go to pure consensus. Okay. Universal consensus. And that is, it's this funny video of they were trying to pick their candidates for running for office, and they couldn't even have their meeting because everyone had the ability to call a point of order, even the people in the audience. So somebody would come up, point of order, hey, I have, and they talk about their, I'm sensitive to noise, or I'm sensitive to light. It was literally all these people, like, they didn't get anything done because they were trying to gain consensus on how the meeting operates. Okay. So the OPC Foundation needs to move away from a consensus-based approach and move towards an empirically driven decision-making process. Empirical based on numbers. Okay. Those of you, this is a very important conversation. I know everyone is sick of the holy war conversation about OPC UA and MQTT. I know everyone's sick about it. I'm sick of it too. Okay. I want to see the OPC Foundation succeed. I stand back and I look at OPC UA and I say, let's assume the OPC Foundation got their way. And their way is this. We want everyone to ship devices with OPC UA on board, compliant, OPC UA compliant. Let's say every single piece of software in industry ships OPC compliant. Okay? Every single piece of hardware ships OPC compliant. Now, there is a reason that every piece of software doesn't support OPC UA, and there's a reason every piece of hardware doesn't support OPC UA. I'm going to tell you about this conversation I had with a vendor, okay, a PLC vendor this week I had lunch with. And there's a reason you haven't had that adoption. And the reason, there's a whole host of reasons. I guess at the end of the day, it only matters that it hasn't been widely adopted. But if the OPC Foundation had their way, Stefan Hoppe said in his email to me, the only people who don't put OPC UA in their PLCs are the stupid ones. That's what he had. He used the word stupid. Okay. Now, I believe there are stupid people out there. Okay. But I know I can think of 100 reasons why you wouldn't put an OPC server on your device. Literally 100. Okay. I mean, I could think of many, many reasons why you wouldn't put it on your device. So does that make me stupid? There are lots of devices out there that don't have OPC on them. They're literally, the vendor is stupid for not putting, making their device OPC compliant. Yeah, I showed. I'm going to go through this conversation here in a second, but I'm going to talk about this conversation I had with a vendor earlier this week. So this is a vendor that's been around. Everybody knows them. They've been around forever. And the guy that I was talking to was a senior executive. He's been there forever. He's personally been responsible for the transformation of the organization. And we were talking about the OPC Foundation kind of in passing, and he said, his words were, I don't work with them anymore. He said, I did, and I tried, I really, really tried. But and he said it's a shit show. I said they just don't get it, or You know, I can't remember how I corrected it in my post, but he said it's a shit show. You know, and the politics at the OPC Foundation are the primary issue. The primary issue is the OPC Foundation exists to benefit its members. That's it. Okay. The Eclipse Foundation does not exist when they manage the Sparkplug specification or Oasis, for example. They do not exist to benefit their members. They have members, but they exist to benefit the people who are going to use the technology that they manage. The OPC Foundation does not give a shit about anyone who's not a member. Let me say that again. Okay, and by the way, I can say this now because in our conversation with some of the members in the Discord server, and I'm going to go through some of this conversation, they made it clear they don't care. They made it clear that they believe that the people who are critiquing the OPC Foundation are the problem. They believe that the people who don't adopt OPC UA are the problem. And I've said, no, hubris is the problem at the OPC Foundation. A lack of effective leadership is the issue at the OPC Foundation. Lying about what your intentions are is you only care about your fucking members. You don't give a shit about the user at all. Because if the user complains to you, you believe they're stupid. You believe that the person giving you the critique is wrong. Okay? I did not pick this fight with the OPC Foundation without knowing exactly how it would go. Okay? And I didn't pick this fight because I'm bored. Hundreds and hundreds of people in our community. The number of DMs I have, hundreds of DMs of people saying, keep going, keep pushing. They're giving me more ammunition to use. Make sure you point this out. Make sure you point that out. What you have are thousands of people watching this conversation in the Discord server. Between myself, Randy Armstrong, Matt Paris, Jeff Schrader, Randy Armstrong, who's representing the OPC Foundation, another guy named Andy representing the OPC Foundation, Raviel representing the OPC Foundation, and then a bunch of members of the community. I'm think of me as the bull in the china closet. I'm the fly in the ointment. I'm the one I'm using conflict theory. And then you've got other guys following up behind who are supporting the technical arguments that I'm making. Okay, that's basically what we're doing. That's the approach we're taking. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this conversation. Okay. If you don't want to hear the conversation, I encourage you to listen to it. I think it's very valuable. Okay. And I'm going to skip through this, but I'm going to read some of the stuff in here and then I'm going to comment on it. Okay. All right. So let's go to Discord here. This is in the OPC UA channel on Discord. And there's a long, huge thread. I have to figure out where. So he says there are 231 products. Randy Armstrong said there are 231 products with OPC adoption. And he says that's probably a fraction of the products and solutions deployed today. And the reason why he's saying, well, basically someone could deploy an OPC product and we wouldn't know about it. His number's about right. I was able to find through both the OPC Foundation, a separate website that contained a bunch of OPC compliant devices or hardware and software, and then through Google searches, we were able to find about 250 products. Okay. Eric Barnstedt says that OPC UA is in millions of devices all over the world. If you were to say it's a million, I probably could get my mind around that. It's definitely not in the millions. There's no chance it's in the millions. And the reason why is there aren't enough products with a large enough market share to make it in the millions. Okay. The OPC Foundation, the OPC UA spec is nearly 20 years old. Okay. And before that, DA and Classic, you know, that was in the 90s. So they've been around 30-something years. And they have, you know, I'm going to give you a conservative number. We'll go 250 products adopted. And now let's go on the high side. Let's double that. Let's say it's 500. Okay. Well, that puts them on par with Sparkplug, which isn't even 10 years old. I mean, think about that. Okay. The reality is that the OPC Foundation, they've written a spec. I say Part 14 is a garbage, and that started this whole conversation. Randy Armstrong's like, you know, that's unfair. You're a fucking troll, whatever it was he said. No, garbage is something you throw away. And I'm arguing people throw it away. People throw away 80% of the OPC UA spec. We have been unable to find products for 80% of the specification. And they have no answer for it, by the way. None. They have no response. And I don't want to, you know, this isn't fun for me, but it's a fucking reality. You know, and this whole conversation about OPC started with when somebody asked me, it was two questions. Number one, can I use OPC UA for my unified namespace? And the answer is no, you cannot. Because unified names, you could build a edge unified namespace using OPC UA, but you can't build the unified namespace for your business using OPC UA. That was my argument. Okay. And then I laid out why. And I go through those arguments here in a second. But a lot of it has to just do with verbosity, not edge-driven, not truly report by exception. Randy will go, it's fucking report by exception. And I'll go, well, what's all this other shit on the wire? Well, we've got all these other things going on. Exactly. When you say report, why do you care about report by exception? Because you want as little on the fucking wire as possible. Why? Because you want to reserve bandwidth. Why? Because you want to have more runway before you hit critical mass in your network. It's why lightweight matters. It's why report by exception matters. Okay. All right. So there was, I want to go here on this product thing. So Randy said there's a lot more adoption than you expect. 231 products, not counting SDKs in the product catalog. It's probably a fraction of the products. So I'm going to say, based on my count, it's 250. And let's give another 250 products that are not listed anywhere. Okay. So let's say it's 500. Matt says, what's the count if you exclude products that only include DA, including 20-year-old tech that isn't notable in my eyes? And then what's the count of products that are consumers of non-DA tech, ANC, HA, PubSub? Randy said DA is still relevant. Brokers have a role, but the push model has limitations because the set of data published is fixed for all consumers. Now, for a non-architect, you may just that may be a throwaway statement in your statement today. But what I'm saying is that there's no scenario, there's no application we've come up with where push publishing doesn't work. But he's saying it's still relevant because there's use cases where you can't use it. Matt says, I guess I'm saying that DA is table stakes today. He's correct. It won't be too long before when we are further away from the release of OPC UA DA than the milestone was from the release of Modbus. All right, so let's get into what Matt Paris says is his fundamental complaint. He says, I think what you are pointing out is the issue. And what he's saying, he's responding to Randy saying, you have to understand how the spec development process works. If something is not in the first release, it can't be mandatory. This is a fundamental issue with OPC UA. You don't know enough in the very beginning of building technology, whether that technology is technology you're going to go to market with or whether it's technology inside of an organization, like in the case of digital transformation. You only know what you know. And if the approach of writing a specification, okay, means that I have got to get all the mandatory stuff right in the first release, otherwise I'm fucked, then the specification development process is broken. Because you don't know what needs to be mandatory until after adoption. Okay, technology makes us smarter. What we want when we start developing technology is a function of what we know. Technology makes us smarter over time, so what we want changes. And if you're literally painted into a corner from the moment you start writing a specification, and that's the argument for why OPC UA has low adoption, well, change the fucking approach to writing the specification. Okay? Matt says, I think what you're pointing out is the issue. A specification needs a well-understood use case to be defined, and the use case should fit within a broader unified architecture. The use case will always be limited by the imaginations of the people involved at the time it's contrived. Yep, or limited by their knowledge. OPC UA DA was developed 20 years ago. The spec, therefore, only includes required functions for the narrow viewpoint as it was understood back then. Given the market will only do the bare minimum to check the box, OPC UA DA will continue to only be relevant in the narrow use case that was conceived 20 years ago, which is the argument I've been making. I've been saying, why would I use this? Why would I go through the trouble of implementing Part 14 when I don't need this stuff? Like the barrier to entry is easier with MQTT 5 or Sparkplug than it is with Part 14. And Randy's response has always been, well, because specifications are important. Well, I was a machine builder. I mean, when I worked in Tier 1 automotive and we built machines, nobody asked about the fucking spec. I mean, I literally had to abstract the technology in order to build a unified namespace for our punch presses, pin presses, and heat treat processes, because the only thing my organization cared about when we were building a machine was CapEx, total cost of ownership, and function. That's it. There's no, hey, do you have a visionary specification in here for 20 years from now? You have to be able to become specification compliant with little to no work. The barrier, it must be easier to implement the spec than to not implement the spec. Okay? It's like the fruit's got to be hanging so low that we're not investing any additional capital. And then Randy goes back and forth making an argument. I want to move down to a later conversation. Okay. All right. So here is what. Let me say this. All right, let me see here. Blah blah blah. All right, here we go. So after Matt asks his question, Randy says there's a trade-off. It was understood that this capability was needed from the beginning, but there was also a need to release a minimum viable product. Back when UA was first released, no one wanted anything other than DA without the DCOM. That said, we have a profile model. We could release a profile in 2024 that mandates reverse connect, which would make it mandatory going forward. What he's talking about is Matt put a list of limitations of OPC. Randy's saying, oh, well, we could do that. He goes, this is the kind of thing. One of the things that I've been saying is that OPC UA is pay for play. Okay? That's what I've been saying. I've been saying that OPC UA cares about only its members. It doesn't care about, when they say they say their mission is interoperability for industry. It's not. It's to sell more products for their members. That's it. That's all they give a fuck about. Okay? And I get to say that. Now I get to say that and confirm it because that's all they continue to say. They accidentally let the cat out over and over and over again in these exchanges. He goes to Matt Paris. He says, this is the kind of thing you could advocate for if you joined a working group meeting. GE is a member company, so you can put any topic you want onto the agenda for a working group meeting, and it will be discussed. Feedback from end users is always welcome. Well, it turns he is assuming that Matt Paris works for GE. He doesn't. He works for Hire, which is a subsidiary of GE and not a member. Okay? But what Randy is saying there is, well, because GE is a member, they get their shit on the working group agenda, which is exactly what I have been saying. The largest companies, General Electric, I've never even mentioned GE because they're inconsequential today, but thank you, Jeff Immelt, for ruining a wonderful American company. Microsoft, Beckhoff, Rockwell, all these big players, Siemens, what they want is the direction of the OPC Foundation. Okay, what they want. Okay, so I'm going to skip forward to where I chime in here. I said, today is my birthday, and I couldn't have asked for a better gift than for acknowledgement that the OPC Foundation is, in fact, pay for play. By the way, I'm loving this discussion. Bellata, if you're not a paying member, you're obviously someone who could bring no value. Keep them out. Even Rick Bellata is saying, Andy says, sorry to say that, Walker Reynolds, you said that you have fuck you money. I do, yes. Do you know how little the OPCF membership costs compared to your company's profits? The whole pay-to-play point is ridiculous. No, what you need to understand is pay-to-play in context of how they operate. Okay, so OPC Foundation operates as a political organization where the biggest fish have the most influence in pay-for-play. Okay, so this senior executive who works for this OEM who doesn't have anything to do with the OPC Foundation anymore because he really tried is just one example. That's one of hundreds of examples. And all along here, it's been, and I feel bad for Randy Armstrong. Randy Armstrong's part of this conversation because Eric Barnstadt and I were tagged on the same post from Andreas Vogler. And rather than Eric chiming in, he tagged Randy Armstrong and said, hey, Randy, this is your baby. Why don't you chime in? Eric knew, there's a reason Eric doesn't engage. He knows he would get chewed up and spit out. He would get, it would ruin, he would never be able to justify many of his decisions or the questions I would ask him. He knows he would struggle there. And so rightfully so, he's avoiding coming on our podcast or engaging in any way, shape, or form. I think the argument, the fact that he chairs 12, 15, he at least a third of all the working groups, and he works for Microsoft. Okay. In fact, Microsoft basically pays him to chair those groups. He's also an architect for Azure IoT. Eric is the one who brought Randy into this, and Randy had no idea what he was getting involved in. Randy had no idea, the benchmarking we've done, all the testing we've done, all of the research and writing that we've done on OPC UA. I think he expected that I don't know what he thought he was going to be up against, but he clearly, was not prepared for the group he was going to be talking to, and I do feel bad for the guy. So Andy said, sorry to say, you said you have fuck you money. Do you know how little OPC membership costs compared to your company's profits? The whole pay-to-play point is ridiculous. No, it's not. The original argument that the OPC Foundation made was, no, we are not pay-for-play. That was their argument. That's no longer their argument. They've acknowledged, yeah, we're pay. You're right, we were pay-for-play. Okay. I said, Andy, that's a separate argument altogether. Pay-to-play and affordable are two separate points. My argument has always been that OPC UF is not concerned with interoperability for industry. They have been concerned with interoperability for members, ergo pay-to-play. It changes the incentives and the outcomes. And then he says, well, even they have to pay the bills. Well, they also don't have to conduct themselves the way they do. So a lot of times they'll bring up Oasis, they'll bring up Eclipse, they'll bring up the Sparkplug working group, and they'll go, well, Oasis has memberships. How are you not? Well, the difference is what they have are a select group of people who are financially supporting the efforts of Oasis to benefit everyone in the market. The OPC Foundation is not concerned with benefiting everyone. They are not concerned. They are concerned with benefiting their members, which has been my argument from day one. Okay. He said, the OPC Foundation is not an open organization there to serve all of industry. It is a preferential organization that prioritizes the needs of the members who spend the most money, invest the most capital. As a result, the spec goes in the direction those preferred members want it to go. And oftentimes that direction is the opposite of open and interoperable. This has been my position for years and my point all along. He said, I'm fine with that, but what would you do different? Why have you not been a member? And I said, I'm not a member because the spec is not salvageable. I would refer back to what Matt Paris said as to why it's not salvageable. Okay. I am not a member because the code of conduct discourages dissent. I am not a member because the code of conduct prioritizes consensus over empirically driven decision-making. I'm not a member because in my initial conversations with the OPC Foundation at the ARC Advisory Forum, it was very clear what their motivations actually were, and interoperability was not it. Hell, when I asked them how they measure the impact of their efforts on manufacturers, the ultimate consumer, they had no answer for me. A deer in headlights. He said, shouldn't you have asked that particular question to machine builders leveraging OPC UA? I mean, their goal should be to have an impact. Don't get me wrong, I try to understand that because that's exactly what my job is, helping machine builders get their machines prepared for IIoT. Well, if you're using OPC UA as the IoT protocol, they are not going to be successful. OPC UA is not an IoT protocol. It is an OT protocol, okay? Therefore, I appreciate this community and the conversations the past years. I said, I talk to a lot of machine builders, and they say the reason they don't adopt OPC UA is because they don't know which parts to use. I focus my efforts on the OPC Foundation because they are the ones who are claiming they are focused on interoperability for industry. They are not. They are focused on interoperability for their members. A summary of Stefan's own words. The only PLC OEMs who don't put OPC on board are the stupid ones. He doesn't see non-members as his customer. He's the president of the OPC Foundation. And that quote comes directly from an email he sent to me. He said, that's a confusing response. You usually start with a profile, and from that you can pick and choose, but I assume that at the time they don't know how to model a machine. To figure that out, you just have to read part 1 core concepts, to be honest. I mean, you need to start somewhere right. A spec. You don't need, you don't start with a spec that you have to get right in the very first iteration. Otherwise, you can't make anything else mandatory. And that's referencing back to what Randy Armstrong said. Okay. Let me go down. Randy said, to my OPC Foundation is not an open organization. They're there to serve all of industry. He said, this is a nonsense point. That means it makes no sense. Give me one example of an SDO where participation does not mean influence. No SDO can function without volunteers devoting time to committees and standards. Sparkplug was developed to meet the business needs of Hive, Ignition, and CirrusLink, full stop. No, Sparkplug was developed to solve a unique CirrusLink problem long before they ever even talked to inductive automation. He doesn't even know that. HiveMQ didn't even fucking exist when the original Sparkplug was written. Okay, HiveMQ as a company did not exist at all. The first iteration of Sparkplug, and I don't remember what Arlen said here, but the first Sparkplug is like 2012, 2013. They weren't even introduced to inductive automation until 2014 or 15. The first CirrusLink's modules for inductive automation for Ignition were they were a couple of years after the first Sparkplug. Then Sparkplug B was what they learned from working with a SCADA platform. Okay? But I've heard this over and over and over again. They'll go, oh, well, Sparkplug is meant for Ignition. No, it's not. How do you explain that Canary Labs, Flow Software, TatSoft, which is a fucking competitor of inductive automation, they're all Sparkplug compliant. It's not an Ignition standard. And by the way, Ignition doesn't drive the development of Sparkplug. HiveMQ doesn't drive the development of Sparkplug. And CirrusLink offers resources from Arlen Nipper and Wes, who's one of the big developers of the CirrusLink's modules, to drive the specification. I am not a member of the Sparkplug working group. They have asked me to be a member of the Sparkplug working group. I have told Arlen, I'll consider it, but I think my use is better out here communicating to industry how I think they should work and what's effective in our experience. That's where I think I'm better suited. He also said, the notion of empirically driven decision-making is bureaucrat speak for, we cherry-pick the numbers that support the decisions we have already made. Is that so? That's not how the scientific method works. It's not how it was taught to me. That really sounds to me like somebody who has experience doing exactly that. Okay. In the end, everyone in business is to sell services and products that require delivering value to end users. You use arguments to promote what you want to sell and denigrate those you see as competition. That's what Randy says to me. The same is true for every other player in the space. He's literally telling you what he does. He's literally, what he's doing, this is a purely egocentric argument. Okay, so from his perspective, he is viewing the world. He's viewing all other people through his own conduct. And then he is projecting it onto me. That's what he's doing. Because what he just said, I'm using arguments to promote what I want to sell and denigrate those I see as competition. There are people watching this or listening to this or watching this video right now who are vendors, they are end users, they are quote-unquote competitors, other systems integrators who are competitors in one of my companies. There is nobody literally no one you will be able to find. The number of vendors who are shocked that I will not enter into commercial relationships with them. I will advocate for their products. We will be strategic partners. I will work with them to tell them on how they can make the product better. But the number of vendors who are simply fucking stunned that I am not asking for a quid pro quo when we are working together is all of them. So what I want you to do is I want you to find one member of this community who says, I am driven by money. I want you to find one customer of mine who says I'm driven by money. I just had a conversation with one of our clients about they need their rates dropped. They recently filed for bankruptcy a couple of years ago, and they're basically starting from scratch, and they want their rates to be dropped. And we have this meeting, and they want the rate to go down significantly. And my position to them was, listen, if I can afford it, we'll lose money on you. Got no problem. Because you need us. You need our team. There's not another team that can come in and do it where you are right now. You need us. Okay, so if we can afford to lose money on you, my vote will be yes. We'll go to the rate you're asking for, even though that rate puts us in the red. Okay, that's what I do. Okay, my goal is to save and create middle-class jobs. That's my goal. But he says the same is true for every other player. That's an absolute statement. The main dividing line is between companies that promote the use of open standards like OPC UA. I'll say this again. It's not fucking open. It's not open. Let's say everybody gets what you want. Everybody gets what you want. Okay, so that is everybody puts OPC UA on board, every software, every piece of hardware. There is absolutely no fucking guarantee that you could pick two random devices and have them talk together. And based on the way the specification is written, there is absolutely no guarantee that you will get anything of value from that connection, because so much of the specification is optional. So many times what you are going to see when you try to parse is node, object, 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 object. You may not see any of the node attributes. You may not see the profile if they didn't write a parser for it. Fucking 80% of the specification, at least, is optional. Even if you got what you wanted, it doesn't guarantee open. And they'll go, but, this is hard. You have to understand how specification... No, the only fucking thing anyone cares about are the results. And when I keep asking the question, well, why would I adopt it? Why wouldn't I take the path of least resistance and use MQTT 5 or Sparkplug? Why specifically MQTT 5? Because what we're ultimately doing is we're taking all those nodes that we package using Sparkplug, we're taking those nodes and we're turning them into flat MQTT for a UNS. Okay? He says the main dividing line is between companies that promote the use of open standards like OPC UA that allow multiple vendor products to interoperate, and those that you like that say screw standards, just push all data into a proprietary environment like Litmus or Ignition where it can be reprocessed. That is not what we promote. We do not fucking promote push all data into a proprietary environment like Litmus or Ignition where it can be reprocessed. No, Ignition and Litmus are nodes in an open ecosystem. They must meet the minimum technical requirements of the technology upon which the digital infrastructure has been built on. And it just so happens that they do. Oh, even when we use OPC UA. But the question is, wow, what we find is that everyone is in the business of converting OPC UA into something else. No one leaves it native. Why? It's too fucking verbose. Half of it can't be parsed because the fucking clients, the clients don't speak whatever's been implemented. And then Matt and Randy go back and forth, and I actually try to stay out of it and let them just keep going. Okay. And then Randy and I come back into it. Randy says, he says that I have something to sell. And I said, Randy, you clearly have no idea who I am or what my mission is. Support this statement. You use arguments to promote what you want to sell and denigrating those you see as competition. No, I don't. In fact, there are competitors who I teach how we do what we do. Some for free. Okay, so I have no idea what he's talking about. Tell me what argument I make to sell which products or service, and then tell me which competitors I'm denigrating and what makes them my competitor. Here's what I sell. Nothing. And the answer is, I don't sell anything. I just solve problems. Okay? I am compensated for my travel, and I am paid a fee to speak all over the world. I break even on every speaking engagement. I do as many speaking engagements as I can for free. We have 900 paid students who support the education of 12,000 at IoT.University and 1 million across all other platforms. Each year, 4.0 Solutions loses money. Our goal is to break even. Intellic Integration, a company I own, is one of 5 integrator partners of 4.0 Solutions, where I actually work. I have nothing to do with the day-to-day operations at Intellic Integration. I am chairman, and I receive a monthly report on the health of the company. What we teach in Mentorship and Mastermind is how we built Intellic Integration. Intellic Integration only works with manufacturers that we cannot find a partner for. We accept fewer than 1 in 12 opportunities. How I run my companies is attached, and I actually dropped in our mission, our vision, and our digital strategy. And I said, these are the statements I have made about OPC UA. Number 1, OPC UA is pay to play. It's true. My statement that OPC UA is not the future of IoT is true. My statement that OPC UA is not an IoT protocol is true. My statement that Part 14 is garbage is true. It gets thrown away. My statement that the OPC Foundation is concerned with benefiting only their members is true. Not only that, they confirmed it. My statement that OPC UA is too verbose is true. My statement that OPC UA has very poor adoption is true. Now, Andy and Randy come back with comments. In here, I actually do these supporting. He goes, I said, here's what I sell, nothing. And he says, tell yourself that if it helps you sleep at night, if you could not make money, you would not be doing this. I'm climbing my second mountain. Okay. So I said, Randy, I sell nothing. I solve problems. Sometimes I'm paid. Many times I'm not. I give away as much as I can. I'm a mission-driven person. I use my influence and power for good. I invest my money in people. All throughout this conversation, you and Andy have acknowledged each of my points were true and then backtracked or pivoted to a different argument. And then John Forboard said, Walker, would you agree that you have an incentive as a thought leader or a visionary to provide accurate predictions about the future of technology? So if you at some point in time made a prediction, you would have a tendency or a bias to confirm what supports the prediction. And I said, no, of course not. I would have to assume the people who listened are idiots who can't think for themselves. I mean, these claims are measurable. I don't want anyone to make a decision based solely on what I say. I want smart people to check for themselves and make their own decisions. Let me say this again. Never take what I say as gospel. Ever. Take what I say as the pointer that points you to look. That's it. Randy says, I may have conceded that parts of what you say have merit. That is in no way an endorsement of all the nonsense you spill. Your entire vendetta against the OPC Foundation and OPC UA is almost parody. Okay, I don't have a vendetta against the OPC Foundation. If Stefan Hoppe and Eric Barnstedt reached out and said, hey, let's figure out a way to collaborate, I'd do it. Okay. The only communication I've ever received from that leadership is, I know what Eric says behind the scenes because there are people very, very close to him who, I mean, they're better political animals than he is. Okay, let's just put it that way. They're better at putting on a brave face and talking out of both sides of their mouth than he is. Okay. The only communication I've ever received from Stefan Hoppe was that email in 2021 or whatever, and it was just riddled with inaccuracies, untrue statements. Okay, and then it had that statement that the only people who don't put OPC on board are stupid. Okay. So I just said to him, tell me the inaccurate statement. That's empirically driven. Okay, so then I even drop in the statements again. Randy says, every tenured professor complains they're unbiased and not motivated by money. I didn't say that I'm unbiased. Every single person is unbiased. I am impartial. What I do is I abstract out incentives. I make it so that I don't have an incentive to say something. That's why I don't accept quid pro quo from vendors. That's why I try to abstract out the incentives so that I can speak knowledgeably. He said, none of the things you said are true. Some of them don't even have facts that you can twist to claim as a basis. What's amazing is Randy's a smart dude. He definitely knows his shit, and I love engaging with him. But this is preposterous. Like, preposterous. I mean, Randy's blinded by hubris. So much of the foundation is. They're blinded by hubris. It's staggering. There are thousands of people in this community. There are hundreds of people hundreds and hundreds. There's a core group of 30 to 40 people who have done the deep dives here, who have done these tests, who have tried to implement OPC UA, have tried to find the products, and realized, as Jeff Schrader says, it's vaporware. Okay? So I did supporting statements for each of my claims. I said my statement that OPC UA is pay-to-play is true. You and Andy to Matt Paris. Use GE to get your ideas on the agenda. They're GE, and what they want gets on the agenda. I said my statement that OPC UA is not the future of IoT is true. You acknowledge OPC UA is an OT protocol and belongs in OT. Okay, and then he goes and says IoT is a buzzword. No, it's not. The Industrial Internet of Things is a word designed to describe all of the smart things in a business, all of the nodes in a business connected together on one technology. Stateful. Okay? It's not a buzzword. That's what he says later. My statement that OPC UA is not an IoT protocol is true. See the statement above. My statement that Part 14 is garbage is true. It gets thrown away. This will be clearer in our published tests of MQTT 5, Part 14 in Sparkplug. I just did a simple one right here. We have a really extensive one. I do not see the reason. I haven't even found a reason, not one minor reason. I haven't found a reason why you would adopt Part 14. I haven't found a reason. My statement that OPCF is concerned with benefiting only their members is true. Stefan's statement about those who don't join are stupid, and Andy's statement about GE's influence. My statement that OPC UA is too verbose is true. Measure the wire, not hard. Read the spec, not hard. Later on, I put in the results of, overhead testing, OPC UA, MQTT, Modbus, and HTTP. It's not hard. Just measure the fucking wire. Okay. My statement that OPC UA has very poor adoption is true. 20 years in paltry adoption, 80% of the spec. You can't find a single example. All right, and then John said there's always an incentive, even if it's not money. I was taking a stab at what can be won on a more subconscious level, and I guess the argument would be I've made statements, therefore I have a bias to try and support those statements. I got no problem admitting I'm wrong. In fact, in this case, when it comes to the OPC Foundation, I want to be wrong. I've said it over and over and over again. I want OPC UA to be everything the members at the people at OPC Foundation say it is. It's not. And it's easily measurable. It's not. It just isn't. And you got to be able to answer the question why Sparkplug has had, Sparkplug has hundreds and hundreds of products, which is equivalent to what you have in OPC. Like, even if you go, let's give them the gratuitous number of 500 different products. and you give Sparkplug the conservative number of, which I believe they're over 300, they're still nearly even, and OPC's been around since the 90s. Okay? So I did say, yeah, I have biases. I don't know if I'll read that. Let me say this. Yeah, let me do that. My biases are below, and I visit them often. So number one, people who want to control what you say want to control you. People are born selfish, and through achievement become altruistic. Incentives drive action. So always ask, what is the incentive and who is incentivized? Purnell's iron law of bureaucracy, Shirky principle. Those are my biases. My positions are based on experiential and empirical data. I suspect that's true for many. I don't care about status. My LinkedIn should tell you that. How I respond to being selected as a top 100 influencer, yada, yada, should tell you that. I never repost it and say thank you. I'm so honored, blah, blah, blah. I don't do that. The reason why is because, honestly, I don't care. I don't need someone to tell me that my ideas are influential. If they're influential, great. It means it's providing value to people. If they're not influential, I'll just enjoy them myself. I don't like being in front of the camera, and I don't like speaking in front of people. What I want to do is spend time with my kids, train in the gym, and build cool stuff. Humility is the reason I'm in front of the camera. Humility is one of our core values and expertise. So I am an expert at this. So therefore, it's my responsibility to be here. Humility is knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at. People are counting on me to do what I'm good at, which is be in front of the camera and stand in front of people. But that's not what I want to do. I don't want to be there. I don't like it. I'm introverted. Okay, all this stuff that I share is to benefit industry, to help save and create middle-class jobs in the U.S. Okay, I said I'm at a point in my career where I'm paying it forward. If you want to know my motivation, that's it. I'm a leader. I've been blessed. I have a responsibility to do so. It's really that simple. All right, and then Randy. So Randy starts talking about pay to play, and he says, I've responded. Give me an example of a standard where the companies that paid for the engineers to sit in committees did not influence the process. There's a huge difference between influence, and corruption. There's a huge difference. And Randy just doesn't hear this. And I'm not the only one saying it to him. There are a lot of people. Okay? Crickets. It's true of MQTT, Sparkplug, JSON, or Protobuf, or anything else you can imagine. You want to twist these facts to trash the OPC Foundation. No, I'm making a statement. They are pay to play. You're the one who's interpreting it as me trashing them. I think Part 14 is garbage. That is me trashing the OPC Foundation. It is easily measurable. No one's fucking using it. You wrote a bullshit fucking garbage spec. I am sorry that you wrote a garbage spec. But I didn't write the fucking thing. I'm simply observing it is getting thrown away. How the fuck am I the bad guy? You're the one who wrote a garbage spec. I don't know what made you think that you were going to be able to write a pub sub specification that recommends MQTT as the transport layer, and the co-inventor of the transport layer you're recommending left the fucking working group because of how you operate. I mean, if that's not cognitive dissonance, I don't know what is. What I said to him is, Randy, I think you got suckered into being exposed here. I feel for you because you didn't know any better. Okay, and I know that's condescending, but I went back and forth. I'm like, should I fucking write that? I wrote it because it's true. Okay? What I hope this exchange does is drive change at OPC Foundation. No matter what the motivation is. Even if it's to spite me and prove me wrong publicly, I'm okay with that. I want to be wrong, because if you're able to drive change at the OPC Foundation by checking off my statements as false, all the things I said above, the winners are manufacturers, and they are my mission. And also, Randy, this is a logical fallacy when his talk about pay to play. I'm not saying I'm superior to you. I'm saying this is a logical fallacy. Care to guess which one? Okay. He says IoT is the latest buzzword. I said I'll respond when I get back. And so then I also dropped in here. They were talking about MQTT, OPC, and I dropped in the results of this benchmarking. This is it's Exxon Exco Resources benchmarking, where you'll notice the little tiny overhead is right here, MQTT. This is Modbus. This is HTTP, and that's OPC. Okay, this is packets and this is kilobytes. He says there's more to IOP than raw throughput. Good example of picking metrics to tell the story you want. No, what we were doing was measuring the fucking what's on the wire because lightweight was the goal. He's like, oh, just cherry pick. No, Randy, you don't decide what's most important, buddy. You don't decide. You know what that study was? Total cost of ownership of a day's worth of 5-second data. That's, by the way, something next to impossible to calculate with OPC UA. Why? Because so much of the specifications is optional. Oh, man, I don't even know what argument you come up with there. I said, not when it comes to total cost of ownership. This is fun. We should have this debate forever. And then they start acknowledging there's like a light bulb moment. I go, ladies and germs, I think I see a light bulb moment. They're trying to figure out, okay, how the hell is it so lightweight? It's because the assumptions about how technology is being applied by manufacturers are wrong. Their assumptions are wrong. That's why. The applications are driving specific needs. Total cost of ownership, CapEx, and function. Like they always do. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Let's go here. And then let's get into this last piece, and then we'll call it a day. Andy actually comes through and does a lot of, gives a lot of good feedback and says, hey, you should use this, 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 and this. And my obvious question is, why is no one doing it? And the answer is, there's a whole host of reasons. And then, Jeff Schrader and Mark O'Donovan, a bunch of other people get involved and are engaging with Randy and these guys and going, well, what about this point? What about that point? Mark O'Donovan, actually, this is a really great point. But I'm going to skip all this and just get to the last part of it. So Andy makes an argument, basically, that we need to mandate that vendors use OPC UA. That's what he says. And he references something going on in Germany and the EU, whatever it is, his argument is we need to mandate, that OPC UA can solve a lot of the data problems and therefore mandate it. And so I said, so the OPC Foundation's strategic plan is to use mandates to drive adoption. We're talking about innovation here, not continuous improvement. Just like Germany got Industry 4 wrong in 2013, they're going to be wrong here. It fails to acknowledge very important points. This is the most important part of the thread. Number one, all manufacturers are different. So while the workflow is generally the same, CRM to ERP to MES to SCADA to PLC HMI to warehouse management to shipping to AR, AP, and repeat, what is on the plant floor is a function of each manufacturer's problems over time. Oftentimes, what we need to standardize isn't clear until we're much further into our journey, not in the beginning when we're just trying to solve the business problem right in front of us. I mean, all you got to do is be a part of a greenfield operation that was built. I mean, we had a client who they were making recycled shingles. They were basically making roof shingles out of plastic, out of recycled plastic. That process had never been built before. Okay, all the decisions they made on the plant floor were a function of just being able to manufacture the shingles at scale. There was no consideration about how data would be communicated, how it would be modeled inside the devices. Why? Because they didn't know what the models ultimately would be at the end of the day. They only knew what they knew. All manufacturers are different. I was a product manager and a process engineer in Tier 1 automotive at my last stop before moving into consultant. This was like my 12th year in manufacturing. I was tasked with both specifying, designing, and leading the builds of punch presses, heat treat processes, and pin cut machines, as well as supporting this equipment all over the world. We were, in effect, our own OEM, but not in the typical sense of vertical integration. I abstracted out a UNS infrastructure. Me, the guy who created Unified Namespace, I abstracted it out, rather than speccing in the tech required, because I've been doing this long enough to know that the decisions that are made during the build have to do with function, CapEx, and TCO, and nothing else. Number two, the U.S. will never mandate, by law or edict, a single standard for process data. Why? Because our economy is built on innovation, not planning. The tech that will win in the US is the tech that is open, safe, and with very low barrier to entry. It has to be easier to implement it than to not implement it for integration into common infrastructure. My team and I had lunch yesterday with a senior executive of an edge device OEM that makes PLCs that's been in business 50 years. This lunch was after my exchange with Randy Armstrong that I just read above, but before my powerlifting meet. We talked about many things. Schneider's new MQTT patent for MQTT over Sparkplug to program PLCs. No, he does not work at Schneider. MQTT Sparkplug, the OPC UA spec, its history and why it doesn't get adopted, and Part 14, plus his company's new offerings in hardware and firmware. I took many things away from this conversation, but two really stood out. Okay? Number one, the big players in our industry have done some really fucked up things when it comes to patenting technology post facto. That means after the technology has been invented or has been used by other people. That is claiming IP that is not novel as their own. He told me several stories about how corrupt the industry has been over his time in it and how his organization has made the decision multiple times to fight it out in court for the benefit of the community at large. One of the reasons we have only recently started seeing web servers on PLCs that serve out HTML pages is because one of the big players patented this use post facto and then sued anyone who served web pages out of their PLCs without paying them the $900 license for the patent. Sometimes that $900 license to serve web pages was twice the cost of the device. That's just one of a million stories like that in our industry. I've been doing this 25 years, and I'm still appalled sometimes how deep the corruption actually goes. One of the reasons I produce digital media is so I can document for the public where industry stands. And I like to think the only reason one of the major players hasn't tried to patent or trademark UNS and hijack it from the community is because we documented its origination publicly. And by the way, there are a lot of people producing content about unified namespace who are trying to do just that. They have no fucking idea whatsoever what they're talking about. They're making most of the shit up, but what they really want is search engine optimization where unified namespace in their blog post returns you to their website somehow. Number two, this senior executive is not a fan of the OPC Foundation and had some stories to tell. In his words, I really tried with them, but it's a lost cause. He said a shit show. All of their efforts are focused on MQTT, this company's efforts, and with and without Sparkplug, HTTP, and other tech, not OPC UA. Okay, so apparently he's one of the stupid ones, right, Stefan? I'm shooting a video. By the way, they do support OPC. They have an OPC UA server. But they're not doing any further development. They're not implementing Part 14, for example. I'm shooting a video today. It's actually this video I'm shooting right now that will go over these conversations. After all of this talk, and this has been a couple weeks now, my positions all still stand. Everything I listed, these things to be true. I want to see OPC Foundation succeed. I really appreciate Andy and Randy's engagement here. It's invaluable to the community. I hope you take back the feedback here and do good with it. And I'm still waiting on that product recommendation. The one product you want me to test to shut me up that demonstrates all that OPC UA was meant to be. For now, I've got 30 or so smaller products to test, starting with a Ravil's O-Box, which he's announcing at Hanover Messe this week. And then he said, I don't think we're far apart. This is an important piece here. He goes, I don't think we're far apart on the technical issues, but the endless vilification of the OPC Foundation gets tiresome. You say you talk to people who have tried to change the OPC Foundation, but did they actually fund engineers to attend working groups and present an alternate vision? I have not seen anyone try that. Sounds more like NIH rationalization. I don't know what that is. Randy lives in Canada. He might be talking about their National Health Service. I don't know. I have no idea. OPC UA is in the process of a split. On the one hand, there will be a REST plus MQTT with JSON gzip for a cloud initiative. That's the big announcement shit that we'll see this week. And the other will be a client server with PubSub over UDP, UAFX. Each of these stand on their own, but share the architectural foundations. Cloud Initiative has everything that you've been asking for, but you can't seem to acknowledge that and keep reverting back to your vilify the OPCF mindset. It is a great strategy if all you want is likes on YouTube, but it's a horrible strategy if you want to encourage collaboration that leads to better solutions for end users. No. Well, here's my position. My position is that there needs to be a leadership change at the OPC Foundation, starting with Stefan Hoppe and then immediately following with Eric Barnstedt. That's my position. The thing that needs to happen right after that, when they bring in the new leader, you know who I'd love for it to be? Rick Bellata. I want Rick Bellata to be the president of the OPC Foundation. Okay? He's going to say no. I'd love for him to do it. And then I'd love for Rick to say our first order of business is to change our code of conduct and to change our methodology for how we write our standards. That's what I'd like to see. And what I'd like to see is for the OPC Foundation to be focused on collaboration across the user base, not service of the members. And I would like to see the OPC Foundation focus on implementing the best ideas. The best ideas must win. The best ideas must win. The best ideas must win. Okay? And I don't care about likes on YouTube. And my response here was, I'm sorry you don't like how people feel about the OPC Foundation, Randy. Randy, the foundation is the problem, not the people who critique it. Are there good people there? Yes. Are there people who work hard there? Yes. Two things can be true at the same time. Good and hardworking people at the foundation that has failed to deliver on its mission because of hubris. And by the way, they demonstrate the hubris in their exchanges. Conflict of interest, and a consensus philosophy that does not prioritize the needs of manufacturers over the business interests of the members. You are in the midst of conflict theory right now. I'm using conflict to achieve a goal. Every single message, comment, post is calculated to meet a specific end. A change of leadership at the OPC Foundation and a change in strategic approach at the OPC Foundation and a restructuring of the incentive structures at the OPC Foundation. The foundation will change its approach or die. It's that simple. This isn't personal. It's a function of the needs of manufacturers. Let me ask you this. Maybe this is the problem, Randy. What type of manufacturers have you worked for? And what I mean is, how many years have you spent working for the end user on the plant floor before becoming a consultant, and in what industries? Jeff Schrader said, if one has a clear conscience, they should not perceive critiques as adversarial. With humility, concerns are an opportunity for improvement rather than an attack on one's credibility. And I said, agreed. I take it even one step further. When you have a clear conscience, you are looking for the critique. Where are my blind spots? What did I miss? What is the low-hanging fruit? Was or is this of value to you? And then Randy said, the issue is criticism which does not make any sense, i.e. criticizing the foundation over its membership model, despite the fact that every other SDO has something similar. No, not every other SDO has something similar. The former members, even the people who work with the OPC Foundation, even you argue, you say, I don't get involved in the politics. Even you, Randy, acknowledge that there are people within the organization who are driving the best interests of their business and of their companies, and they're in power. Okay, the OPC Foundation has no place to argue that they are trying to drive interoperability for industry. They're full of shit. They're trying to drive interoperability for their members. Okay, it's pay to play. You're not screaming about Oasis. Yes, despite numerous attempts to explain why this argument's unfair, you still keep repeating it. I see this as evidence you have no interest in good faith discussions. Bullshit. Here's a perfect example, okay? The OPC Foundation does not, you do not take, like for example, if I were to come to you with part 14 and I say to you, why would I use this? Like, I don't understand why I would pick part 14 over MQTT 5. And you would go, because standards. And I would go, well, no, aren't you saying that I have to use an OPC UA compliant client to parse the payload from part 14? When if I just parse it myself before I publish it with MQTT 5, so I end up with parent topic and then the list of topics with values that I actually want to fucking read, if I have to do that anyway, then why don't I just do that to begin with? Like, I don't understand why I would implement that. I don't understand it. I could see a use case where my ecosystem was OPC and there were Part 14 clients, which I can't even fucking find. And then he says, not all criticism is valid. In fact, a lot of so-called criticism is unfair. How is empirical criticism unfair and designed to attack and destroy rather than encourage improvement? Well, here's the reason I'm attacking. The reason I'm attacking is because for the last 20 years, the way that the OPC Foundation operates has not benefited manufacturers. It's called trying a different strategy. I don't give a fuck about your feelings, Randy. No one gives a shit about your feelings. No one cares. No one cares about my feelings. Okay? Someone with a clear conscience can recognize and act on legitimate criticism and still reject the illegitimate. No, what you're doing is you're saying criticism is illegitimate de facto. Criticism is illegitimate, and because I say it's illegitimate, I don't have to respond. Let me just say this, okay? Stefan Hoppe he's going to end up not being leading the OPC Foundation. I don't see how the OPC Foundation survives. I don't see how they survive. I don't. I look at the landscape. I go to manufacturers. I walk the plant floors. We do these Gemba walks. We do these digital transformation maturity assessments. We look at the most advanced digital companies in the world. OPC UA is an afterthought. It's a fucking afterthought. It's a thing we got to convert. That's what it is. It's a thing we're using on the edge for process control, where we want to take the namespaces in an OPC server and we want to convert those to topical namespaces in MQTT. And even Part 14 doesn't give you a mechanism to do it flat. Okay, and then he says, please articulate what you expect to have and given the shifts that are already occurring. No one on any OPC committee believes that client server has any serious role to play pushing large amounts of data to the cloud. Good. PubSub is the way to get there, whether it's MQTT or some other broker technology. Even Microsoft is abandoning AMQP. Well, by abandoning, I mean they're not expanding it in industry. OPC people understand that pushing data out of the factory requires data formats that are understood in the IT space, which excludes the OPC UA binary. This is why JSON is the primary data format in the cloud initiative. It's great. I think it's awesome. My question is, why would I take the time to learn the Part 14 specification when I can just do that with MQTT 5? That's the question I'm asking you, Randy. What value is the specification? What value is Part 14 bringing developers, hardware OEMs, and software developers? None. What value? Tell me the value. And you'll go, because specification. No, not because specification. You know, the reality is that we are literally converting from the spec'd payload to a flat payload. Everyone is doing that because what they want to get to is tag and value. Do we build endpoints that have big JSONs in them? Absolutely. But that is an endpoint for a specific consumer. So now if I have an OPC UA Part 14 consumer, some piece of software, let's say it's some analytics platform that is looking to parse a Part 14 payload, well then maybe I have a reason to package it that way. But I don't understand why I would choose Part 14. I don't understand it. I understand why I'd pick Sparkplug. I want to encapsulate all the tags and values into a device, and I want to have process control. Okay, I want to encapsulate it as a device, and I want to have process. I want to add in all the stuff that allows me to safely control a device. Now, I would think that would be the argument for OPC UA, except it's not. Because you're not doing that over MQTT. You probably can, but you're not. What else is needed, he says. What else is needed? There needs to be an inventory of the specification. The end goal needs to be that if something says it's OPC UA on board, then that needs to mean the same thing across all products. That's what it means. Okay. What else is needed? A change in leadership and a change in the philosophy on how the OPC Foundation writes their spec. You got to move away from consensus. You have to move away from consensus. Apple doesn't operate on consensus. Tesla doesn't operate on consensus. Amazon doesn't operate on consensus. Volkswagen North America doesn't operate on consensus. Okay? You have to make empirically driven decisions. Because you operate on consensus, you're a political body. You need different leadership. You need a different approach. All right. With that, I'm done. I'm done. All right. I know that was long. Hopefully you got the value out of it at the beginning. Like, subscribe, comment down below. Actually, one last thing. If you have an OPC UA product you want me to try, please put it down below. All right. Like, subscribe, comment down below, and I'll see you in the next one.